The Cone of Glass and Fire. Chapter 1. Exceedingly Important. The lips were together, blowing to whistle the maid of Tralee, but only a thin squeak made its way into the air. Oh, heck! Oh, not enough puff left. Or was the sound nerves only escaping? He couldn't tell. Most embarrassed, he turned his dark curly top under his cap to try and spot any audience. None, except Mr. Turner, but that didn't matter, because his long years at the cutting wheel had played him havoc. Now he heard the wheel all the time, apparently, as he frequently reported to Aunt Jane, who was the most sympathetic with all her country cures as they stood prayer book in hand after church. Mr. Turner bemoaned a tinny, high-pitched whine in his ears all day and night, as well as his problems from breathing the air in the workshop. Poor chap. Whew. And what a name as well, Harry thought. Turner. Just right for a cutter, sitting there all day, the grinding wheel whirling fast enough to make you dizzy. But I don't fancy that. By this time he had enough puff for the maid, and blew an admirable, almost sea shanty-like rendition, in his own opinion, the whole way along Brettle Lane and back again. He stopped only to deposit exceedingly important packages from the huge basket, almost as wide as he was tall, to each of Harper's customers along there. He knew the parcels were exceedingly important, as Mr. Harper told him so at the beginning of every round. He laughed. Though why Samalina, matches, shoe polish and the like were exceedingly important, God alone knew. Mentioning God, he prayed for it not to be a stoker's apprenticeship either, although he couldn't think what there was to learn about stoking anyway. You just got your shovel in and shovelled, didn't you? That's what his dad had said, and he remembered his dad coming home almost covered in soot and muck sometimes. No wonder he'd coughed. But still, he would take it if that's all there was. He would have to, he determined. Corrugated brow and a mournful whistle if he had noticed. He couldn't let them down. The whistle prevented his teeth clenching, a stomach tight in knots. Not even hungry. Oh, well, almost a marvel for him. It's not that I don't work now, what with the deliveries and then the lining work we do for Mr. Darby, the best freelance cutter in Stourbridge. But he was a funny old bird. You really had to make sure you said Mr. to him, and if you leave that out, then no more work for sure, he had heard, as once an entire family had found out, from such disrespect, as Auntie Jane called it. Oh, well, still, worse for them and good for us, Harry thought bitterly, and much against his true nature, but knowing already how the world turned and what you had to do, graft and more graft, he seemed to remember in the eternal dad's voice. But the lung cough had carried him off, everyone said. It was a hard rhyme. In his mind he saw the shadow of the world with its doorway dark and now beckoning him through. Lost for a minute, the maid was mournful on a sudden. Defiantly, extra effort he made, and she became loud and brassy. He began thinking he could end up making pots. That might be all right, but underneath he knew it would be monotonous, as how hell's described sometimes in a form of cursing. Jane might give him a little cuff if he said it, to remind him to set an example to the others, being the eldest. All day such thoughts had been coming. He kept a defiantly jaunty maid in the air nonetheless. "Harry, common as muck, are you?" Suddenly his mum's voice slightly hit him. Mum never yelled. He smartly broke off mid-maid. "What, mother?" he questioned her, with gormless boy eyes, a cheek to put her off. It was a reaction even boys of his age still could not resist. He received a pursed-lipped look and sigh. Always much worse than a yell somehow, that little sigh of hers. Yet she distracted herself with her own good mood, which Harry had been slow to pick up on, only now feeling it. It seemed all right then. Not a stoker for sure, he realised, at which he brightened, straightening, coming over to those beckoning hands. Up to that point he'd sort of leaned away, as if that would delay or rid the world of whatever horrible news was about to burst upon him. Indeed, as Jane and Mum had looked when the letter from Mr. Sterling had arrived, asking for her to see him herself this morning. "Sorry about the whistle, Mum," he said quietly. "It makes lugging this thing easier," he moaned, putting it on a bit. "Oh, hush up, Harry. You're a big, strong lad. You should see the things the women lug outside the mines. Think yourself lucky." She frowned, slightly pursed lips again. "But never mind about that now. Just listen for a minute, will you?" And she bit her bottom lip, smiling at the same time, which she always did when excited. This seemed good, and he was going to say, "I am listening," exasperated with nerves, though he stopped, thinking it might be taken for more cheek. And this seemed not the time. "Mr. Sterling's second assistant wants to meet you at 7:30 tomorrow morning. Sharp, mind, at the offices in the works." "Aye," he answered, none the wiser. His eyes showed it, and she took hold of both clipped-up delivery boy hands. Their sleeves, they rubbed on his arms, which hurt with his shirt suspended up, but he wouldn't dare complain. Doubtless there was something those poor lads and lasses in the mines had to do which hurt much worse, yet he winced. "It means the cone. It means the cone, dear. I went to see Mr. Sterling as he—" She quickly looked away and then back. "Anyway, he promised. Pot 1, cone 1. She told him emphatically, her eyes bright, pretty, round and wide, looking straight into his beneath her beautiful long lashes. She had worn her best frock today and done her hair properly. So pretty his mum was. She'd looked nervous this morning, which had affected his own thoughts, yet now he'd not seen her so happy since before Dad died. This in itself brought a smile now creasing his own face despite the pinching, and as he understood his new prospects and what it meant for his family's life. The basket slipped from his gripe and sent tumbling the remaining exceedingly importance rolling on the Brettle Lane cobbles in their gleaming white Harper's packages. Mum and Harry had been about to commence a jig, though they quickly bent down to pick up the exceedingly importance instead. Alas, they were gleaming no more. Mum said she would say it was her fault if anyone complained. She took the heavy basket with him, and they happily glided down the streets, not noticing the deliveries, each holding back in the outside world their exuberance, just as they always did their sadness, which is what Mum said respectable folk did. Well, at last they were on their home. At last they were, on their way home, with a kind £2 of scrag end towards tomorrow's tea from Mr. Harper, as he liked Harry's mum. In fact, they would probably still have received it as a strange love token, even if the gentleman had known about the spillage on the cobbles. For this gratefully received providence, Mum always met Harry on a Thursday, when she finished early, in hopes of a little extra just for a chat, as she called it, from Mr. Harper's brother's butchery. But that was naught compared with their new hopes. We could be made, Harry quietly spoke, linking his mum when they finally left Mr. Harper's. She just squeezed his arm, speaking volumes. Though not all apprentices made it high in the glass trade, Harry ignored that. He'd been at school longer, was more educated on starting, and was most determined that he would not stay at the bottom somehow. And at Stirling's not many lads were taken on, and there were rules to stop the abuses many gaffers used in other works, such as making the lads pay for each footing they gained in the trade. They knew they were lucky. It was Stirling's. And they spoke no more of it at that point. Yet both were thinking with almost awe of the bright cones of fire and glass that were about to become Harry's world, though Mum sighed a little at having to meet Mr. Stirling. Chapter 2. What have you got? Sitting down and looking around on coming in, Harry became at once almost too aware of his responsibilities. He, as a thinker and dreamer as he was, found it rushing and rushing through his mind. The time was upon him when he felt he was really to be the one who stood up as a head. Yet he was bewildered, hardly more than a boy, 13 years old. It was the longest Mum had dared leave him at school, 14 soon. He was older by far than most other boys who became apprentices, he mused, and therefore had little to chide about. Still, he wished his world were different, and I do love them all. I do. I know I do. Even Abby, though she's a terror to my cousin Poppy at times. He breathed in with tight lips. There now, moaning in his head and worrying. He felt a coward, but some thoughts crept in no matter what he did. His belly still didn't feel right. Oh, blooming heck, they were still there. His own fears. Oh no, here I go again, he sighed. What if I'm no good? What if they don't take me on permanent? What if the fear of the world and even the cone, for all his determination and awe? He had been 8 when Dad had died and Dr. Fenner had taken him to one side, a moment he frequently remembered, bidding him, "No more tears now. You must look after your mother and aunt and the girls, for your father's sake and for all theirs." He remembered it well, almost every day. He'd stood up with the doctor quaking a little, yet firm. The doctor had shaken him by the hand, a little man of 8, and the quiver had reduced to a shiver. He had told the doctor he would do his best. "Yes, I believe you will," the doctor had answered. Yet now he really would be taking over in place of his father, and he wasn't anything like a man fully. Not really. Still just pretending to be a boy, like the day Dad had died. And he gulped at his other thought. No more school. His teacher had wanted him to try for the free grammar in Stourbridge or the Bluecoats in Old Swinford. He surely would have got in, Mr. Craven had said, but no chance for any of that. Then needed a wage. It happened with other families he knew. Everyone knew who the bright ones were, and how perhaps they could have gone on if they hadn't needed the money more. Almost tears pricked up hot and revealing. Oh, one more gulp. Send them away, Harry. He struggled despite his happiness with Mum earlier and his desire to help them all. This would be, and would have to remain, his own private sadness. Perhaps like Jane's having no husband of her own, or none of her own children, or indeed whatever it was that was Jane's sadness, for she never told you what it was. In fact, he understood about that for the first time now, that though you could feel it, you might never speak of it. Yet he consoled himself. It was not the cutting room, not the boring pot making, and not the stoker. "Come on, lad, bring yourself back to life. Do you want some tea or not?" It was Jane herself, her rolling country voice filling the room. "Hey, wait for me!" he shouted as they made to dive in on the meal. They all laughed. They were just pretending to wind him up, and it broke his dark reflections. He laughed too, and a place at the head of the table had been laid for him. He quickly rose up, and just sitting there helped. He knew it was his place to say the grace from today onward, and just saying it helped too, though he struggled with emotion in his voice, with their eyes all upon him. There was something new in their look, though, especially after the Amen. He wasn't sure what it was. A new feeling for him to see. He didn't comprehend. Well, who cares? They were starting in on the food. It was only when the first rush on the steaming stew had descended, dumplings slid nicely down, that the starting was there, the asking. "Well then, I can't bear it any longer," said Jane. "It's either very good or very bad, and I can't make up my mind, considering what a wet weekend you look just now, Harry." She gestured towards the fireplace with her own tousled head. The 3 girls followed her look with shouts of, "What have you got? What are you going to do, Harry?" Charlie jumped slightly up and down on the bench, which was not really allowed at mealtimes, but she obviously thought that today would be an exception. Jane continued, "You were definitely a cream... yes, a cat with the cream pot when you first came in." She looked at Harry once more. Then she looked narrowly over at her younger sister Sally, who had done her very best to keep a straight face to that point. But he never got much past Jane the elder, who, knowing her very well, now discerned or brought out the merest hint of a smile at the corner of her lips and rumbled her. So the truth was told. And then everyone was talking one over the other, fast and tumbling like dice rolling down, and even seconds of dumplings were forgotten for the while. It was like the meals Dad had had with them. Harry remembered. He'd been a merry sort of chap, with his twinkling eye and many a little joke. It was at table that the family missed him most, although Mum probably missed him all the time, he realised. It seemed so anyway. She'd not been herself, everyone said, since his departure, though she seemed to have been getting better the last year or so. With his news, Harry now became really happy to be bringing this much pleasure to them all, but there was a tiny worry at the back of his head. He really had better make sure he worked hard and did everything properly, he thought. After dinner, lining glasses was forgotten for just one night. We can catch up on Sunday in the morning early before church. The Lord won't mind, just for once. He knows our situation. Mum would never ever say our poverty, or because we are poor, because there were so many people so much worse off than themselves. Take the new workhouses, for instance, Harry thought with a shudder. And so many of the workers making chains and nails for hardly anything in the mud houses in Lye on the other side of Stourbridge, or those in Dudley and Birmingham, with some of the terrible houses he'd heard of there too. So they weren't poor at all when you considered them. And, compared to Birmingham, round about Stourbridge, Brierley Hill and Amblecote even, was almost like living in country, he thought. Well, at least where they were. That was until you actually went to the country, of course, but there were lots of trees and bushes here, even in the glassworks, and many iron makings around. Trees and bushes right inside the walls very often. Stirling certainly was like that, although he had heard that there were plans to cut down some at the back to make way for a new, bigger furnace that wasn't even going to be a cone. Mum carried on, her Christian guilt leaking all over. I hear many a cutting wheel in the district on a Sunday, and see the marks on people's hands where they have lined a few, and not even bothered to wash. God won't mind us doing it just once, and we'll wash proper before church, won't we? She looked at them all individually, especially Charlie and himself. Before Dad had died, Mum had worked in the offices, he remembered, bright and educated to a clerk's level, although no higher, though after she changed to the lining rooms, painting lines on the glasses for the cutters to use as a guide. She was the fastest, and she was the best, they had found out from her work with Mr. Darby, lining blanks he got from the glassworks to engrave. And perhaps she could have been a draftsman, except she wasn't a man, he thought, confused. Yet she earned more money lining than in the office as an ordinary female clerk, which was unusual in itself. But female clerks didn't really earn much, less than half the men did. It didn't seem fair somehow when they did exactly the same job. However, all the liners were women, and with her there, the family got nearly 20 shillings a week from her speed and skill, and it was always the money that mattered. He, so far, had earned 3 or 4 shillings a week between his 2 after-school jobs. He never got paid much as a kid, but in the cone, if he worked hard and was in a good team, he might even earn up to 10 on a very good week, he had heard, and possibly still have plenty of time to do one other job. It turned out that his mother had even got him the prime daytime shift, ending at 3:30 in the afternoon. How on earth she'd managed to get him on the best shift, with the best crew, pot number 1 at Cone 1, he had no idea. He had asked her at dinner, and she'd said, like getting £2 of scrag end, darling, for a nice chat, though her eyes had looked away, and he could see there was no point asking Jane just from that look in her eye, the guarded look, and he noticed his mum had it too at that moment, as the sisters had shared a glance. The same look they'd had when Mr. Sterling's letter had arrived the day before. But now he'd got a place, he had to do his best. It was draining in the Cone. The furnace sapped your energy, apparently, and not everyone could cope with it. Just being there was bad enough, let alone moving and working. How would he do? He didn't even like the sun that much, despite his dark hair. He remembered his dad's tales of... Well, he didn't want to think about that. It would do no good. I might even make it worse. The glassworkers all had such stories. Maybe they were just that. He could only hope. Chapter 3. Remember this, remember that. He got to Stirling's no problem. The impressive high gates with their wrought ironwork curly embellished above his head as he passed through. It was at this point his nerves reared up, breath trembling and shallow on its journey in and out. He went a few short steps across the courtyard, then deadly stopped. I have no idea where to go. There were lots of people rushing, all clear on their path at that time of day towards their place, before the courtyard clock struck the half-hour. Why hadn't Mum told him where Mr. Smith would be? He thought, with the desperate blame of the nervous. Like most boys, he did not like appearing as one who had no idea of something. He, whom his teacher, Mr. Craven, had had such high hopes and such high opinions. It stuck in his craw. Yet, as he dithered, trying to catch the attention of eyes intent on their own inner worlds and duties, the courtyard was clearing, till the large clock struck its time, and after that the final few hastened to run, disappearing as if the clock was magic. Now there was near silence, though he could see carts to be filled and men down by the canal cut where things came in. The activity had begun there far earlier, and most other people just wanted to be at their stations on time, it seemed. It was now so quiet Harry could hear his own steps and his heart, so he thought, what a fool! I should have asked someone when there was so many here. Yet that could not be helped now. He looked at the magnificent frontage of the glittering wide-windowed building ahead, and had nearly made up his mind to go through its tall mahogany-polished doors, when a male voice, soft with Irish lilt, halloed him from his right. Harry looked over to find a lad, a little ragged, tall, with 17 or so written on him, springing to speak, though Harry had almost missed what he said. "I'm sorry?" Harry's eyes were confused and helpless, like a newborn lamb that has lost its ma in the field. No, no, don't worry. Are you the Gaskell? I'm thinking you must be. I'm Jamie Sullivan. I was sent to meet you before 7:30, but I couldn't find you. It was all bedlam, and then I went in the corner and see if you'd gone there by yourself by mistake. Now I've come out and he found you. Yeah. Harry was nodding about bedlam and who he was, and that now Jamie had found him. Pleased to meet you, the lad continued. He would have shook Harry's hand, but looked down at his own, slightly grimy, and Harry's, completely scrubbed, and the boy in his best Sunday clothes, and the older thought better of it. He just pretended to instead. They both laughed, dispelling any remaining tension in the air, and their eyes met in mutual pleasure at the gag. Jamie's rich laughter rose into the air, even that lovely sounding. Harry's own laugh high and boyish by comparison. All right, all right. Jamie composed himself after a minute. Quick now, he told him, with a glance at the clock, and spoke swiftly, softly after his laugh, but now saying what had to be said. The offices are up there. Just go up the steps. Mr. Smith's office you'll find at the end of the corridor. He pointed round to the back of the prestigious-looking building. Harry huffed it as quick as he could, calling out a swift, Thank you, Jamie. Jamie was already off on his way, back to the cones, to his job so neglected. But he shouted to Harry in reassurance with that smile. It's all right. Don't worry if he's cross about you being late. Just tell him how it happened. We'll back you up. We will. The possibility of anger due to lateness revived all his previous unease. Making his way as quickly as he could, he was soon waiting, awkward, before Mr. Sterling's second assistant's door. Yes, it was painted. A sign, Mr. Sterling's second assistant, with another, much smaller, that said, Mr. Smith. Who would want to be called second assistant? Harry wondered. It was like being in the second-level choir who only sang on some ordinary Sundays, or perhaps the second team for rugby or cricket. Nobody wanted to be second at anything. That's what he'd found as a lad in school. First was the thing. All boys knew that. But the second assistant was called Mr. Smith. Just that. Smith. And no more. No less. Perhaps he preferred seeing his title on the door. Just call him Sir, his mother had advised. Just say, Good morning, sir. Or just plain, Good morning. It's very polite and, well, office-like. I must remember that, he thought, then went blank. And what were the other things she'd told him to do, such as, remember to stand straight, don't tug at your collar, hold your cap in both hands or take it off when you go in, don't cheek him in any way, and none of those dreadful gormless looks you do, Harry, or it'll chuck you straight out, right into the street. Remembering all this made him fair to terrified instead of feeling, well, like the man he was supposed to be feeling right now. A man came out from the door. While he was staring at it, taking Harry unaware in his remember thises, and the lad jumped as the large frosted cut-glass door banged shut. So was this Mr. Smith? Probably, he thought. A medium-sized man of 35, yellow hair, whiskers and eyebrows, holding some papers. They seemed to have nothing to do with Harry, with their grand Sterling's heading and lines upon them. Ah, the new boy. One of the Gaskells, aren't you? He made no mention of the fact that he was late. Perhaps he just didn't realise. Maybe he thought, oh well, whatever he thought, it didn't matter. Yes, sir, he stammered out. Yes, sir, I'm Harry. Ah, that's right, he replied without too much interest, as if testing Harry on his very own name. Going into the cone, aren't you? Yes, sir, he said again, wondering what else Mr. Smith was going to ask him. The questions Mum had primed him for, what she had heard, was usual at times like this, but for Harry there was nothing. Well, good luck. It's hot in there, Mr. Smith said simply. Well, that's true, Harry thought, but didn't say it, as at school it would have been considered a right load of cheek as well. Then Mr. Smith quickly stuck out his hand to shake Harry's, which he did firmly for a second. Welcome to Stirling's, he said decidedly. And then he was off. I'm in, Harry thought, bewildered. By that time, Mr. Smith was already gone. A fast mover out through the third door, which shook just as much as the first one had, and clearly busy fellow banged it shut behind him. Where were the questions about my schooling and etc., Harry thought, feeling relieved and a bit cheated at the same time. He stood for a moment thinking, what am I to do now? Where do I go? And when? He did not know whether to knock on one of the 3 doors around him. If he did, which one? And he stood there thinking about this for a while, plucking up the courage, when a bespectacled and freckled head popped out of one of the other doors, followed by a long skinny neck and the skinny body, sort of like a snake charmer as he slithered out, or at least a funny picture their teacher had shown them once. Harry Gaskell? The freckled one asked. Yes, sir, Harry replied, remembering one of his remember-thises just in time. Oh, I'm not a sir, really, though thank you for the compliment. I'm just a clerk. Your mum was Sally Gaskell, wasn't she? She still is, Harry thought, but didn't dare cheek. However, sensing his mind, the clerk said, I just mean that she used to be with us here in the general office. I just remember her until... and he tailed off suddenly. There was an awkward pause. But then diplomatically the freckles thought up, but before she went into the lining rooms. They both seemed relieved. Harry was just about to say something. I'm Thomas Craven, and we all knew your mum. Very funny, and thought by all the chaps very... And he tailed off again before adding, handsome, in an embarrassed way, and going red at the seams. Yes, she is, said Harry, just slightly too young to be embarrassed himself. Still, it was all very strange, and not at all what he had expected. Let me take you down to the cones, said Thomas, who seemed no more than 19 himself, and not at all haughty, as Harry had expected all clerk-type people to be. But then again, he had never spoken to any before, really. I was going to work down there myself when I first started, Thomas continued, but I flaked on my first day, and they had to drag me out of there. What you putting? Harry thought this was some advice for in the cone, and was very alarmed, but just then they went through a door and walked down the outer steps from the offices, so he changed his mind and wondered if it was just advice for getting down the steps, as they were rather wet from the Stourbridge habitual spring mizzle. But oh God, he thought, the stories were true. Lads do just faint, and oh, the shame if he, a Gaskell, should do that. His heart beat faster, and he repeated to himself, don't think about it, for probably the 50th time over the last few days. Harry could now see Mr. Smith over the far side of the courtyard, talking to 2 men in dirty shirts, trousers and boots. One of them had a strange pointed cap on, close around his head all the way round, making him look like someone Harry had seen before, but he couldn't bring him to mind. He wasn't watching his feet as advised and nearly slipped. "Oh, careful there," said Thomas. "These are treacherous. I've gone over twice myself. But then again, I've also cut myself badly in the cutting room, as well as my ignominy in the cone, and even burnt myself making tea. So I daren't complain. Otherwise I think Sterling's would chuck me out completely." He laughed with good nature. "I'm a wretched clerk too. I start imagining rather than doing my job. So really I do the post and other errands. But at least I get to think and to study the dictionary and some other books during lunchtime." He nodded his head a few times. It bobbed back and forth on his slightly long neck. "That's what I like. Oh, words," he smiled. "Aren't they lovely?" As though Harry must simply agree with him. "I've never thought about it," said Harry politely, although he really was itching to ask what ignominy was, or scared to, in case it had anything to do with being on fire. His teacher, another craven, always said, "Ignite the flames," every bonfire night at the start of the celebration. He felt awkward not answering, and finally surprised even himself, saying something that he had never considered before. You see, Harry thought an awful lot, but never about what he did or didn't like. Life wasn't like that for them. There was the struggle of finding enough ways to get enough money to keep a roof over your head, and as they managed to do that, they were lucky really. So it wasn't a question of likes and dislikes, and he'd never thought, well, he never had a lot of spare time. Also, since he was 8 and his dad had died, he had become rather more serious than most boys, working hard at school, as Dad, when dying, had insisted that he must do. And he worked hard with jobs outside of school, as well as taking care of his sisters and his cousin and his aunt and his mum, and she had changed. And he thought it was up to him to make them happy, and he tried very hard to do well for them. However, he sometimes found himself cheeking nonetheless. "Well, I'm only a boy, and I forget," he thought. Yet he did certainly find himself actually thinking sometimes, like when he was on his round, or even when he was lining glasses. And that was no good, as he then made mistakes if he wasn't concentrating, and the whole lot would have to be done again. Mum just looked resigned and said, "Boys never are any good at lining. That's why they get us women to do it in the firms." So now, being asked by Thomas, only one thing came to mind that he actually liked doing. I like drawing. I like to draw," he said, just thankful for having thought of something to say, and for not falling down the slippery steps. He continued, "I don't get my hands on much paper but there are always the flagstones and some chalk, though that's no good when it rains a lot, like now. I do it on marching days on the side of the path, and people give me halfpenny. It's good for a shilling by the end of the afternoon." "Oh, really?" asked Thomas. "What do you draw?" "Well, anything really. But I like insects and birds and trees and even flowers." He was thinking of the countryside where they sometimes went outside from Stourbridge and Brierley Hill, off to his mum's old family village out past Wollaston. In pictures he had done many bunches of flowers too, for Mum and Auntie Jane and the girls. Well, they seemed to like girls. They seemed to like flowers, girls. Though Charlie liked horses and asked him to draw them. One girl at school had let him kiss her after she'd Well, after he'd drawn her a bunch of flowers on Mum's advice. Good advice, he thought, as she'd been very pretty, and occasionally he was just starting to like girls, though he didn't quite know why, because a short time ago he had thought they were horrible whiny creatures, and much preferred the snips and snails route to fun. Ah, words and pictures, Thomas enthused. It seems we will have much to talk about then. What? Even though I work in the corn? Not in the offices? Asked Harry, and he hoped he would be working in the cone. He did not want to go through ignominy, as unpleasant as that sounded, and then be cast off into one of the other departments. As a Gaskell, he was pretty sure he wouldn't be chucked out, but he did not want the shame of failure. "Oh, one of my cousins works in the cones," Thomas said, "and he earns a damn sight more than I do. The glass is funny as like that." They were successfully down the steps by now and standing in the courtyard. "People still talk here, well, except the cutters and blowers, they don't seem too much. They're like chalk and cheese, different types they are," he smiled. But I think I can get you some paper from the backs of our blotting pads and used envelopes, as we never reuse here. Stirling's is far too posh for that. Though I'm sorry it will have ink all over one side, that's all. I used some to write down words from the dictionary, but there's plenty more. Harry was overawed by a lad who would say "damn" out in public like this, while wearing a Sunday best shirt and everything. Here it was, the man's world, he thought. Cussing in your Sunday best. Whatever next? And an offer of paper. Very extravagant. He wouldn't count on that, though. Perhaps Thomas was a bit peculiar, as all of Stirling seemed at the moment, and the skinny clerk would most likely forget. By this time they were at the first of the cones. From across the courtyard it could be seen properly as a large red brick building shaped like a huge sugar loaf. It was amazing how the brickies made them, round buildings slowly getting narrower and narrower, steadily round on round, onward, higher and narrower, till they seemed to form a funny little peak at the top sometimes, almost, except it was a chimney. He knew the strange shape was to allow the huge draught needed for the glass blowers' furnaces. "I think this is where you'll be. In fact, it must be, as it's Jamie Sullivan who is leaving, and you are getting his space as taker in and becoming the boy of the chair. He is a new blower in Waterford, where his family come from." "Oh," he sank, feeling disappointment on hearing that Jamie would not be there with him. Thomas was already retreating. "Forgive me if I don't go in. It's pot number 1 you're going to. They have a number painted above, so you can't miss it." He was now calling to him across the courtyard. "Jamie's a great fellow. He'll look after you for a while. Don't worry, you're a Gaskell, and good luck." Thomas gave him a last retiring smile and swiftly left, after glancing at the time on the courtyard clock. "They'll be looking for me in the office. I must go. I always make tea at this hour." Oh well. Thomas had gone, and Harry stood there. What was that about Jamie looking after me for a while? That sounds good. But now Harry would have to find his way straight into the men's inner heart by himself. Well, at least I will still be called a boy for a while, he thought, and it gave him some cheer. standing now right next to the cone as it towered above. It made him excited and impatient, with a twinge of dread for what was to come. He'd never seen inside one, even though they were all over Stourbridge, and a new, larger type of furnace was beginning to appear at some of the other glassworks. Still, the sugar-loaf cones were Stourbridge. Sterling's was all about quality, not quantity. He knew that, and it made him eager and proud to be able to say, "I work at Sterling's." That meant instant respect from anyone in the Stourbridge area, especially if you worked in the cones as a glassblower. He wanted that. Wanted his mum to be happy and not to worry about money in her old age, not to end up on the parish. Jane would probably go back to the family farm. Yet going on the parish was not a thing Sterling's glassworkers feared, as they usually earned enough to have a bit put by and to look after their families. They worked until they dropped sometimes if they liked it. Gaffers in the cones sat down in their gaffers' chairs and did the fancy work, with younger men doing most of the blowing. They could carry on as long as they could carry on long if they had a mind to it. Experts by that time, and many revered for their skill. Yet you had to get a gaffer's chair in the first place, and not all did by any means. But as there's a lot of expansion in the industry, it was more likely at the moment, he thought. As things were, there was a chance that they might not have enough for Mum's old age on her wages, and he knew she had too much pride to go knocking at her relative's front country farm and watermill door, so he had to be good enough. He quavered for a moment, his hand on the slightly bruised brown wood door, bearing the marks of many years' ins and outs. It had a great steel panel riveted on, which was strangely warm to the touch. Oh well. Perhaps it won't be too bad after all, he mused, standing there still uncertain. Time ticked loudly in his ears, seconds marching by. And then, like Harry often did, he on a sudden made a decision. I must look